I just wanted to kind of jump on and create a recording real quick to kind of clear up some stuff with the course project. So obviously, when you're sitting here and you're looking at the course project, you're seeing here's all the instructions and all the requirements for it. But I kind of want to scroll down to the bottom. I want to point out that yes, I did update the due date to May 5th as I thought it was initially set to, and not May 2nd. But the other thing I want to point out down here is on the right-hand side, there's a section called Assessment that if you click on C# Project, it opens up in a new tab or a new window the rubric for this assignment. So basically, this gives you a breakdown of where all the points for the assignment or how the assignment is going to be graded and how the different points are going to be given out for the assignment. So one of the things, I'm going to kind of scroll down here. This assignment has a total possibility of 200 points. So that basically means every 20 points is worth 10% of the grade. So, and I'm actually going to work my way up from the bottom because I want to point out two things that are so easy to miss, and it's 40 points worth or worth 40 points and possibly 20% off your grade. And that's number one, forgetting to include a collaboration statement that sits there and states, hey, I did this on my own. Did this with help using the Zoom sessions with the instructor. I did this with help from a tutor. Basically, your collaboration statement stating that if this is missing, you will miss 20 points. The other thing I want to point out here is comments, because it gets really easy when we're doing tutorials and we're basically following code from the book, that if, to not put the comments in just to get things working. Well, this is your own code. And to understand what your own code is doing, you should be commenting things so that if someone else had to pick this program up, they would understand and know what the intent that you were doing in that section. And if you don't put comments in, you're going to lose another 20 points. So no collaboration statement and no comments in your program automatically starts you out with the highest possible grade of a B or an 8 or an 80%. I just want to point that out. Adding them in starts you out. If you sit there and you have comments and you have your collaboration statement and it meets the criteria, then you've got yourself an easy 40 points or 20. You're now sitting at a 20% for your grade. So the next item of the rubric is functionality, and basically this sits there, and this is the grading that your project functions, that everything works as it should, everything's functioning as it should. I want to point this out because if your project is not working, if your program does not run, zip up the project and submit the project as your final assignment. This is only 10% of your grade, but if there's parts that I can go through and see that there's just one spot that had an issue that was stopping it from grading, I can give you partial credit on this because you submitted your full code. If you do not submit anything, you lose all credit for the assignment. So this is another spot to where it's easy to kind of lose points. I'm going to skip. I'm not going to skip up. So if you notice, when you look, there are two sections or 40 points available for your user interface. When you look at it, very simple. Here's the criteria for 20 of the points. When your program runs in your screenshots, when I look at your program running, it looks professional and usable. Professional and usable does not necessarily mean fancy. Professionally usable means that all the required user interface elements are there. They're laid out to where it's understandable and it's in a usable manner. That's it. This is another spot that's an easy 20 points of the 200 that you can get. The other part of your user interface is that your user interface, that it ties back to the other parts of the program that it should. So for example, when you sit there, it uses the measuring length device to get the measurements that it's going to display. It doesn't generate them on its own, trying to pretend like it's using the measuring length device. It goes through it and creating an instance of the class of the measuring length device. It sets what the units to use are in the measuring length device. It makes a call to start collecting and stop collecting, to start the collecting. It basically, what this whole part says is your user interface uses your measuring length device class the way that it's to the way it should be to display the data that's showing on there. And again, that's 20% or 20 points or 10% of your grade. So now when you sit there and you look, the big area where everybody has a lot of problems and is sitting there and kind of getting very, very nervous and having issues with is the measuring length device class itself. If you notice, there are 3 sections devoted. So the measuring length device class as a whole is worth 60 points within this. And when you look and you say, okay, well, that's 60 points, that's a lot to do. Okay, well, the first part is basically, does your measuring length device class implement your eye measuring device? And what I mean by implement, and does it have the following private fields to be able to do things with, to use within the program? If your program has that and doesn't do anything else, that's 20 points. The next part of the measuring length device, does your class have a public constructor that can be used to initialize some of the fields? So you possibly pass in units to use to be able to set the default units to use. You set your data captured array to the size it should be. You set your most recent measure to most recent measure, the 0. Does your constructor initialize your fields? And more importantly, when you sit there, does your class have access to go back and get the measurements from the device class you created? If it does all of this, again, great, you're there. And then the third part is, okay, your metric value class that you inherited from your base. Do you use it, and does it do what it's supposed to do? Same thing with imperial value. When you start collecting, does the start collecting start a timer that goes through and runs and gets data from the device at a periodic interval? Does your stop collecting stop the timer? Do you have a function that that gets the raw data and returns a fixed length of the history of in your data? That's what the third part is. So if your program does all that, that's 60 points. Your device class. Do you have a device class? And now a device class, the minimum needed in the device class is that the device class is publicly accessible and has at least one main method to get the measurement. And that get measurement returns a random number between 1 and 10, a random integer, because that's key in how you define your random. And it's got, again, because comments are part of it, it's got comments in it. If it does all this, which is again something that's fairly, that from the preview projects you submitted, something that most of you seem to have the grasp of, this is again another easy 20 points out of what you have. And then finally, did you define your interface the way it was? If your interface is defined the way it should be and has the elements that it's supposed to have, that's another 20 points. And again, there were, looking at the preview projects that everybody submitted in week 6, nobody seemed to have issues with that. So when you're sitting there and you're looking, that's 20, 40, based off the preview projects. Most of you would be going into this final project with a minimum of a 70, because most of you hit everything here, and the areas that you struggled were within here. So again, I showed you how to get to the rubric. Go through and look and make sure that your measuring length device does all this, and that's 20 points. Make sure it does this. That's another 20 points. And then if you're having issues with this, again, like I've said, submit your code, submit your full project, because I can go through and see what you have done and grade based off that, and give you partial credit for within this. It's not an all or none on any of these points. So I kind of hope that makes you kind of understand better how the final assignment will be graded. It is worth 40% of your grade, or close to 50% of your grade. But it is also something that can easily, when you look at the rubric that's down here under assessment, that it's easily to sit there and find the points that you need to be able to get a good grade, even if for some reason you have a program that you just can't get to work.